Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 328 of The Zombie Train. I am your host, Ellis, otherwise known as The Admiral. And this week we're taking a question from the aptly named 844 Steam Fan about another UPFEF, which is the 814, which is in Council Bluffs. Council Bluffs is like the Iowa counterpart to Omaha. Now, we had gone to Omaha fairly early on. Like, relatively early in the Zombie Train Incorporated. Earlier than we should have been going that far west. But my young and dumb brain had figured, well, if we need food, we're going to need lots of food for lots of people. We're going to help lots of people, so we need lots of food. So that means we need to go to a place where food is abundant. So we're going to have to go to, like, the Midwest, where all these farmers are. Maybe there are still some farmers that are plying their land out here because you're pretty far away from populated areas. You're far away from any population center for the most part. So you should be relatively unaffected by not just Solanum in general, but zombies, of course. So, we were coming up from somewhere in the southeast. I don't remember exactly where. It may have been around western Tennessee or, somewhere in Kentucky. And we decided, well, let's just sort of go back northwest. And maybe we can loop back through, like, the outskirts of Chicago. And then, come back. Go back to the northeast where we belong. We didn't understand at this point in time how dangerous the Great Plains were. There are things that we didn't realize at the beginning of the Zombie Train Incorporated that seem to make tons of sense now, and this is one of them. The plains being so wide open were really excellent locations for huge groups of zombies. And I'm talking in the hundreds of thousands or in the millions in some cases. They would sort of congregate on one thing because if you can see for miles and hear and smell for miles, the zombies will flock to that one location. So these groups would just get bigger and bigger, usually, as they would just hone in on one thing or another thing that they thought was food, whether or not it was. So that's what ended up doing in a lot of the farmers out there, because how can one person hold off 100,000 zombies? We didn't know about this. We just knew that there weren't a lot of people out there, so we figured, maybe there's some farmers. So we head up, we dodge around St. Louis, and we start heading west. We're avoiding most of the biggest cities because we're not that stupid. And we go up, and we end up going through Des Moines. Which wasn't on purpose, but we ended up going through Des Moines. We got into Des Moines, and we realized that there was nobody there. Not zombies, not humans, not nothing. So we decided, well, if there's nobody here at all, maybe there's humans hiding. We didn't find any. But maybe we can hunker down for a bit, do some maintenance, and, go back, loot the place, basically. See what there is. It didn't seem that damaged. General stuff that got broken during the Great Panic, but nothing else past that. So we're hanging out. The engine is kind of cool. It wasn't banked or anything. It was just sort of cooling down. And somebody notices zombies on the horizon. And I'm talking thousands of zombies. So we get the engine fired up and just barely make it out of there before they got to us. After, firing a lot of shots, bringing a lot of attention, but then we just started going west because that was the track we were on. We get into Omaha. We didn't really want to go to Omaha. We did originally, but at this point we kind of wanted to get home. But this is where we were going. We get into Omaha, and we're just going past the train station. I think it was by the train station, right? No, because it's in the town across the river. So we're coming in, we come through the main yard. One of the yards. and we passed by a station. I did think it was the station. That was my mistake. And I look, and there's two engines. There's clearly an FEF, and some sort of smaller engine. I think it was a Mogul or a 10-wheeler. It's one of the two. So, yeah. Holy crap, there are trains here. They're isolated on pieces of track, but look, that's an FEF. Amazing, right? Super cool. It was one of the first engines that we had just randomly stumbled across, and I mean, yeah, that's not something that happens to you particularly often. I mean, when you're riding along railroad tracks, okay, it happens a little bit more often, but, you know, just in general. So, sorry about that. So, we want to stop and take a look at them and figure out what on earth is going on with these engines and what are they doing here, and why is this station not a station. But of course we know we're being pursued by zombies. So I noted these guys, and we eventually made it back to New England, with the understanding of how dangerous the planes are. We sent a recovery team out to get these engines once the Zombie Train Incorporated started, because, well, we knew that they were there. We knew that they were in rough shape and that they weren't connected, so they weren't our first choices, but we did know that they were, well, whole engines, and they were available to us. So we sent a team out to get these engines, with another engine that they had already restored. It was another Northern, I can't remember which one it was. But they were sent out there with a couple dozen people and some track, and the goal was to get these things onto the track and tow them back to someplace useful. And at that point, I think I told them just take them west, take them over to Cheyenne or something. Actually, it may have been A44, is the engine that they were using, which would make a lot of sense. So, they, to my knowledge, had a serious setback because, as you might expect, what happened is, they get out there, they're doing their thing, and suddenly, thousands upon thousands of zombies show up on the horizon. And they had the smaller engine most of the way moved. They had all the other stuff in the way just dumped. I think they had completely pulled it off the track. I hadn't really given them instructions on, how to do this properly. They were not exactly our best recovery crew. But they had pulled, like, a diesel and a caboose and a coach and maybe a couple more coaches just onto the road at one end. I think it was a diesel. There was something else there, some other engine-looking thing. Maybe it was just another caboose. But, yeah. I remember seeing a picture, because somebody took a picture to send me, of a bunch of stuff sitting on a road, and then a bunch of extra track laid across the area where I assume it was like a parking lot or something. A bunch of fence torn down. The 814 not having gone anywhere, but it looking like they had done something to it. And thousands of zombies all over everything. It was taken out the back of the recovery train as they were getting the hell out of there, which was not the whole train. They left some things behind. They left quite a few things behind. When they eventually came back, again, it's not like the zombies ransacked the place. They're zombies. They don't really care. And so they picked up where they left off. But it was a delay of, like, the better part of a month where they were in the middle of this, and, of course, they stumbled upon a huge, huge horde, which we cared about because we wanted to track those things. So we diverted a ton of resources to sending the Enterprise, the dirigible, to do, like, daily passes of the area to figure out where the horde was, and then sending images back to our main base of operations in Quonset, which was barely a base at that point, where we were using, like, computers to determine the size of the horde, which was special. So that was a breakthrough, you might say. It was something special that we had not done before. We were actually actively using, this was just all from 8.14, and also accidentally finding 8.14, we were using computing power to wage an intelligent war on the zombies, which had a sort of delightful kind of irony to it, I think. Or just like poetic justice or something, I don't know. But what it also meant was that we now had this test bed for, we have a giant horde, we know exactly where it is, now what do we do with it? Because this was a situation that we hadn't really been in as the Zombie Train Incorporated before. This was one of the first times that we had identified a huge horde because, well, we tried to avoid doing stuff in the plains, so we didn't deal with them very often. It's the first time we identified one, and also could track its movement. And so we started doing tests. We, dropped a bomb somewhere to the north. I think it was 100 miles north, and you could see that the whole horde go, oh, what was that? And start trending north. And that got them out of the way, and the army sent in, a pretty sizable division, a few thousand men at least, and tons of ammunition, to sort of corral them, and to take out as many of them as they could. And that was, way up the river. They brought them up the river, and then they posted up on the other side, so that they would try to wade through. And then some of them got swept back down the river towards Omaha. And meanwhile, the crew was in there, and they heard there's a million friggin' zombies in the river coming towards you. And they panicked, and they took the little mogul, or whatever it is, and they straight dragged it across the pavement to the end of their stub track that they were trying to turn into a switch to get stuff onto the main line. When they had gone back, I had said, 8.14 is a priority, what are you doing? So they had gotten 8.14 across the way. They hadn't hooked up the track to the closer in track behind the station to drag that stuff, but of course, like I said, they had just left that stuff off rails in the parking lot, and so they hooked something up, maybe a front loader or something, to the, or like an excavator or something, a giant bulldozer maybe. I don't know what they were using. They had a bunch of construction equipment that they had borrowed from Cheyenne. I assume they borrowed it from the Wyoming Department of Transportation, because where else would they get it? And by borrowed from, I mean they just took it. So, they went and dragged this engine without proper lubrication, without even laying rail down. They just pulled it across the pavement, up onto the tracks, because that was the smartest and simplest thing to do, and then got it properly lubricated and rolled it all the way to Cheyenne. 8.14 was restored in fairly short order because, well, Cheyenne has the stuff for working on an FEF specifically. So that was done in short order, and that engine went out running across the plains, and some across the mountains, based out of Cheyenne, as you might expect. The mogul, again, I don't know the number of this mogul, or presuming it's a mogul. I'm just seeing one hazy picture of it. Ended up needing to get new driver centers because of the shenanigans that these guys pulled, due to the panic caused by the army wanting to go north with the zombies and not south, and them just getting swept in the current of the river down back towards Omaha, and this radio message going out, the horde is in the river and it's coming to you, which was not really correct. So they panicked and oh my god, they damn near ruined an engine. It took so long to get new driver centers for that engine. By the time it came into service, we basically didn't need stuff that small. But, I'm sorry, this is supposed to be an episode of 8.14. I can't really say much about 8.14 in particular, other than that its existence caused this whole fiasco. And that, other than that, it was a fairly decent engine. I mean, it's an FEF. They're good Northerns. I don't really know what else to say. thankfully it didn't suffer the kind of damage that the other engines did at the hands of the inept recovery team. I had to say it that way. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Zombie Train. I'll see you next week. Trainman out.